Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first F5 and HashiCorp joint webinar. The topic today is Zero-Touch Application Delivery with F5 BIG-IP, Terraform, and Consul. My name is Manny Gadde, and I'll be one of your moderators today. Our presenters today are Lance Larson, who is a technical specialist from the CTO's office at HashiCorp. We also have Sanjay Shitole, who is a senior solution architect at F5 Networks. Before we get started with the presentation, here are a few housekeeping items. You will see a list of resources, including the presentation deck, under the slide area, which you can download at any time during the webinar. If you would like to ask a question, please submit those using the Q&A widget on your screen. Sanjay and Lance will be able to take questions during and after the presentation. And in the instance we are unable to respond to all of your questions, we will follow up individually via email after the webinar. We'll also be providing a link to the webinar recording in the follow-up communication, so be on the lookout for that. With that, Sanjay and Lance, we're ready to get started. I will hand over the mic to you.
Thanks, Manny. Hello, everybody. I'm very much excited about today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about how we can use F5 BIG-IP as a code to deploy application services using Terraform and Consul. And we'll see how we can scale application services depending upon your needs. One of the problem, or one of the, what we do in F5 is actually we generate a report, which is called as State of Application Delivery Report every year. And one of the main concern was actually, how do we reduce the operational cost, right? So what we do is we go through those reports, and then what we found out that more than 71% of the participants responded saying that automation really helped them in delivering or reducing the operational cost. Another thing is, how do we scale? A lot of this enterprise need to scale the infrastructure depending upon the requirements. So automation really helped them in achieving that too. Time to market is very important for enterprise, and automation really helped them to achieve that as well. One of the biggest concern, if you look at in the industry, is network automation, right? Network automation is difficult. Its networks are static. Apart from that, according to the state of network automation, one of the main concern, what we found out was the lack of talent or professionals. How do we handle that problem, right? So that's where Super NetOps training really helped them in achieving that goal, right, up to some extent. Another thing is, we have so many vendors, so many tools, different tools, and so many things to handle a framework for automation, and that's another challenge, right? So we have something called as F5 Toolchain, which handles this problem up to some extent. Now, if you look at, we have in the industry different personas, like there could be DevOps persona or SecOps or NetOps. So most of these personas, they actually operate in silos. There is not much of sharing of information, right? And how do we dissolve some of the silos? And that's where basically what we are trying to do is making this easy for the industry, right? So what we are trying to do is make use of this Super NetOps training program as well as the F5 Toolchain to make things easy for the enterprises. Now, Super NetOps is actually, you guys must have heard about it. It's actually an evolution from traditional legacy task-based network operation practice to agile practice, which deals with, like modern architecture and requirements like automation, continuous delivery, and continuous improvement. In Super NetOps, we want to bridge the gap between the NetOps and DevOps and dissolve the silos so that both teams can collaborate efficiently for faster delivery. We would like NetOps to embrace some of the DevOps culture, right? So Super NetOps is actually a training platform for the NetOps folks to learn more about automation and orchestration and learn about the agile way of doing things, right? So really what we are saying is that the NetOps practitioner should build a pretty good foundational knowledge and have enough confidence so that they can deliver this automated infrastructure in an agile way. So in order to do that, we need a pretty good automation framework. So F5 has something called as F5 automation toolchain. And we have several components in the toolchain, right? So we have application services, which we'll see part of this in our webinar live demo. And we have, the first one is the application services, where it's actually a declarative method of deploying onto an endpoint, right? It's a declarative method of deploying application services to a RESTful API endpoint. So when we say declarative, it's actually taking the JSON, declarative JSON, and then sending it to a RESTful endpoint. The AS3, what in turn will do is it will validate the schema and then configure the big IP accordingly for the application services. So the second piece is the DO, which is the device onboarding piece. So typically all your day zero activity, like things like self IP, VLANs, your DNS or NTP kind of activity you can do using the DO declarative JSON. And then the third one is where you can, once you have the day zero thing done, actually you can configure big IP using this JSON for telemetry, right? So you can pretty much, what it will do is big IP will collect all the analytics data and send it to the endpoint, like it could be a Splunk or it could be your Sumo Logic and so on. And AS3 is pretty good it can be integrated with your CI/CD pipeline and so on. So how do you use this toolchain, right? You can think as it event. So you can think like the first thing is like you can bootstrap big IP. So you can manifest big IP using cloud templates. It could be your AWS or it could be your Azure or any other cloud, right? So once you have your template manifested, or once you have your big IP manifested in the cloud, you can use declarative onboarding method, wherein you can send this JSON to big IP and it will configure your basic stuff like your self IP, your VLAN, things like DNS, NTP, and so on. So your day zero is taken care of, and now let's see how we can deploy your applications, right? So that's where your AS3 comes into picture. So you can configure L4 to L7 using AS3. So you can pretty much, AS3 will do things like your virtual IP configuration, your pool configuration, nodes, monitoring, health monitors, as well as other stuff like, for example, your profiles and so on. So once you have day zero, day one taken care of, now you need to see that, okay, I have my applications deployed. Now, how do I monitor those, right? And that's where your telemetry JSON comes into picture. So that's where you can deploy this telemetry streaming on BigIP using this JSON, and it can send all the analytical data to the endpoint like Sumo Logic and Splunk. So pretty much it covers, the F5 automation toolchain covers pretty good framework for automation. Now, what you can do with BigIP and Terraform. So using BigIP and Terraform, you can obviously send all the F5 templates, or you can create F5 BigIP on cloud. So you can deploy F5 templates on AWS, or it could be Azure, or it could be Google Cloud, or any other private cloud as well. So once you have that, once the BigIP is manifested, you can also use Terraform and BigIP provider to configure other services like your virtual IP, pool members, nodes, and stuff like that. So the BigIP provider is already integrated with Terraform. So today, if you download the BigIP, or if you download Terraform and you start writing your TF file, it will download the binary accordingly for BigIP, right? And we do have AS3 resource as well for which is supported on BigIP provider. The last piece is the F5 automation toolchain, which you can configure those services on BigIP as well. So F5 automation toolchain uses Node.js. So that means it's a RPM package which you need to load on F5 BigIP, and then you can pretty much configure or send those JSON declarative files to the BigIP, right? And in turn, BigIP will, or AS3 will validate the schema, and it will configure those application services as required. Now, F5 BigIP provider is, like I said, it's already there with Terraform. We followed all the best practices which are required for the provider. It also has a Go SDK which does all the functional call to the BigIP, and the BigIP provider supports a lot of modules, like more than 33 modules now. We also have AS3 support. That means now you can take the declarative JSON payload and send it through a AS3 resource, which we already have on the BigIP provider. Apart from other things, like you can use to configure network configuration, network related stuff, as well as device groups or virtual IPs and stuff like that, right? Or iRules and other things. So it's pretty looking at adding more functionality for other AS3 from the F5 toolchain about telemetry, as well as the DO or device onboarding stuff as well. So with that, I will hand over to Lance. Lance will talk more about Consul and other products, as well as he will go through the demo as well. Lance?
Thank you, Sanjay. And again, I'm Lance Larson. I'm one of our specialists here at HashiCorp in the field, CTO office. And I spend a lot of time with Consul, so it was awesome to be able to come and not only just talk about that today with you all, but also to talk about Terraform and how we can really provide an end-to-end solution to accelerate the networking part of the application delivery lifecycle that is so often a bottleneck for most folks. So diving right in, when we look at sort of, what's our story, at HashiCorp, we're really trying to enable customers to manage their application workloads, their infrastructures across various platforms. And these are often private cloud, public cloud, and most commonly, hybrid cloud environments that customers are moving these greenfield workloads, to the cloud, and trying to accelerate that, but also dealing with their transactional systems of record and key core applications that live on-prem, and they're trying to sort of accelerate that holistically and find tools that allow them to do that. So when we look at sort of our common operating model, we're not a PaaS, we're a portfolio company in terms of the tools and products that we offer. We sort of look at the application delivery model around 4 critical problem statements: running your applications, connecting them, securing them, and provisioning them. And if you can do all those things well, you can ultimately reduce the time that's needed to push new applications and functionality, and you can differentiate yourself and drive digital value by bringing down those development cycles and creating faster business outcomes. So today in this webinar specifically, we're going to look at Consul and Terraform in a little bit more depth here. And again, the infrastructure space is huge. There's lots of different partners and tools, to Sanjay's point. And for us to really provide a comprehensive solution, we often partner with folks, in those tiers of those problem statements to drive value. And F5 is certainly, one of those partners in the networking and the provisioning space where we can help accelerate each other's solutions. So we'll be looking at Terraform more specifically today again, and just want to talk about that a little bit. So, we've sort of seen customers and our users, our open source communities, move from really static, dedicated servers, physical and virtual machines to much more dynamic workloads, right? And this capacity, it's on demand. It's usually a mix of VMs, containers, serverless, mixed in with the traditional fleet of physical servers and virtual machines. And so our Terraform solution, it's not just for managing cloud. We can manage all sorts of different things. And today we're going to actually talk about, again, how Big IP is one of those tools that we can help manage. The Terraform provider itself, we maintain it. It's written in Go. There's a large community around it. I think there's over 100 providers now for Terraform, and it's cloud agnostic. So if you're facing those hybrid challenges, our tool suite can really help you provision those things and have a unified language to look at all of that as code. Looking at Consul, which is the other piece of this. So Consul is a tool that essentially allows us to provide a service registry. It can provide dynamic sort of health checks for applications. It can provide the service mesh capabilities. And we're really focusing on the core problem statement for Consul of connecting and segmenting your applications. And again, in the same way that there were a lot of challenges as you moved from sort of a more ephemeral infrastructure platform, the same thing happened to the network. And often on these new, more ephemeral platforms, you no longer have a static network with a long-lived IP and host-based identity for physical and virtual machines. Often the network is a lot more dynamic. You might be getting IPs on demand when auto-scaling groups or containers come up. And again, this is a much more mixed environment where you've got VMs, you've got containers, and you've got some serverless workloads that are sort of all in the fleet along with those physical and virtual machines. So digging into Consul a little bit deeper for F5, two of Consul's core things that it solves for is it can provide a service registry, which is essentially a real-time directory of services across different workload types, where they sit in the network, those coordinates, and also the status of those applications. And then once you know where everything is, which is the core sort of unit of work to try to solve this connectivity problem, then you can start providing service discovery to different sources that might be providing routing, for example. So in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on Big IP specifically, and an integration that allows you to update the Big IP pool through Consul. And then we can essentially scale our workloads up and down, provision them on demand. And we don't have to sit in a ticket queue to actually get these node pools updated. We can sort of do upfront configurations. We can let the application workloads come up dynamically. And then once they're up, we can just route traffic through that. And that's all sort of a codified dynamic process. So again, key benefits for this solution. What is Consul and Big IP? What do combining these two tools mean for you? One, you can discover and locate application nodes and health statuses in real time. We can, if a pool member fails for some reason, if it's a loss of an availability zone or just an overloaded instance, and we can just blow it away and provision a new one in its place. And again, all the key points that we're trying to drive here is you can do this without human intervention. You can do it without downtime, and you can eliminate a very ticket-driven process, replacing it with a more automated and less error-prone programmatic approach. So the Big IP in the Consul solution, it's an F5 application, it's an F5 AS3 extension. The package itself actually integrates the Consul API, and the actual virtual edition Big IP appliance can essentially go to the Consul server nodes, figure out which applications are healthy, and it does this again through the catalog that it exposes, and the application nodes themselves run Consul agents that provide health checks locally. So it's this healthy relationship of Consul agents running on the application nodes, providing local health checks. They send that information to the Consul servers. The Consul servers keep that holistic view of the catalog. And with the AS3 extension for F5, we can tap into that catalog and actually get that information into the virtual appliance in real time. So extending on this with Terraform, AS3 has a lot of ways that you can interact with it. API calls as an example, but with the recent additions to the Big IP provider that Sanjay was talking about, we can actually codify the AS3 configurations that are already in JSON with the Terraform configuration, and then potentially push that out as an application package, right? All those things are artifacts. We can version them. We can look at that all as code, right? Testing, infrastructure, networking, and that ultimately will make our application delivery faster to get these applications out, into the fleet and actually get them servicing traffic, right? The applications aren't going to be useful until we can actually get to them and they can receive traffic. So again, Terraform is just one way that you can do this end to end. But if you have Terraform and Consul and F5 and you have Big IP, you can combine all these tools to sort of have a unified approach to this workflow. So we're going to switch gears here very shortly and go into the demo. We did want to show this integration to you live. We think it's pretty cool. Some of the things that we're going to go over in the demo, we're going to go over our GitHub repo that has the AWS and Terraform config. We're going to go over our Consul health checks, the Big IP configuration, our AS3 declaration to actually get the model out there, for what our application looks like and how to route to it. And then we're going to show a quick auto-scaling group demo on AWS to show how we can add to our workload, right? We can provision more Nginx servers in this case and get traffic sent to them without actually any additional human intervention. So this is pretty powerful stuff. And just to dive into the demo architecture. So we have a Big IP, a virtual edition running in demo mode. We have one Consul server running in demo mode. Again, this is supposed to be a simple example. So it's just a single NIC. But again, there are different ways that you'd want to put this into production. But this is just sort of what we're using to show this functionality today. And then we have Nginx running in an auto-scaling group. All the Nginx instances in that auto-scaling group, they run a Consul agent. The Consul instance runs a Consul server. The Consul agents perform those health checks locally. They send that information to the Consul server. And then the Consul server is communicating with the Big IP virtual edition. The virtual edition is reaching out and querying information from that catalog. And we can get to that through an elastic IP that's through the front door. And that client will be me walking us through this environment as we see this stuff happen in real time. So I'm going to switch gears and move over to the demo now, but just know this is a fully supported solution from both HashiCorp and F5. Obviously, we support different pieces, and your account teams and the communities can give you more information on the support for this solution, but know that it is there. So I'm going to dive right into the demo now and share my screen. So this should be coming through here very shortly. And then once it switches over, I will go ahead and dive right into our demo here. dive right into our demo here. Okay. So Sanjay, is my screen coming through okay? Looks like it is, so I'm just going to start here. So going through the tabs that I have open, this repo, we did publish this. So this is public. Everyone will be able to see this. It's under our HashiCorp organization. I'm going to go through what's in these folders really quick. Sanjay went ahead and actually documented the README for everyone, and this uses a marketplace image for the F5, so it's pretty easy to just download Terraform and get started with this example. Going back to this picture in AWS, I've actually done a couple things ahead of time just for the sake of time here. We've got an F5 instance running in demo mode. We've got a Consul server running in demo mode. We have one Nginx server right now. And there's a Consul agent that's installed on that machine. The Nginx is actually in an auto-scaling group configuration. We're going to spin up a few more instances when we go through this live demo. I have the Consul server running, so this is publicly addressable for me. And I can see that we have everything here that we would need. So I've got some health checks already there. I can see that Nginx box that I looked at actually is on and receiving traffic or could receive traffic. Then we've got our Consul server node. So pretty simple environment here. Now I can actually log into the Big IP virtual edition, which I've already done here. So I have the application services RPM installed. I don't have any partitions here, just the common partition, and I've installed this package. And then we're going to go out and push some of this stuff with F5. And when this is all done, we have a virtual server here that'll be able to actually get us to Nginx through this path here, essentially. So pretty simple environment. If all this fails, I do have a video recording of this, but I'm pretty confident this is going to work. So we can just dive right in. So the first thing I did want to cover is just some of those Terraform configurations. So in the Terraform folder, you'll find most of the configuration for the environment. The VPC Terraform file has all the AWS configurations for routing and security groups. We've got some individual configurations for Nginx, Consul, and F5 to pull those AMIs. This is the AMI that it will actually use for the F5 marketplace if you're curious. We've got some basic IAM configurations to do things like auto joining the Consul nodes. And then we have some scripts to actually provision these actual servers for Nginx, Consul, and F5. So the Consul stuff's very, very simple, but we're actually discovering these instances with metadata provided by the cloud. There's no actual hard-coded IPs in any of the auto-join Consul stuff that you'll see. And again, this is all about that identity model, that networking model where IPs and static information like that just isn't going to be as helpful as you sort of use HashiCorp and F5 to push into these more hybrid environments. So using these tools together can really help you, again, solve that problem. And then in the AS3 folder, we have a simple declaration to push our AS3 Nginx configuration, the Big IP provider. These are actually just unsecured in this terraform.tf-vars file. If you're looking for a more secure workflow, we protect these variables. You can check out Terraform Enterprise, but that's a little bit outside the scope for what we wanted to accomplish today. So the last thing we'll look at is this AS3 declaration before we push it out. So I'm declaring a new tenant called Consul SD. This is the virtual address that corresponds to my NIC in Amazon. So if I look here, I can see that that's on that private interface. And I'm going to do health checking in two places from F5 and from Consul. There's some best practices on where you might want to do this. And again, you can talk to your account teams for more guidance on what might be best for you. And this is the stanza that's actually going to be the most relevant to today, is this Consul service discovery type. And this essentially tells us that we can go to this Consul server. Again, because it's in demo mode, we're just giving a static IP here on this box that corresponds to our Consul node. There's different ways to handle that in production, but this will essentially query the Consul catalog and get us information about these Nginx servers at this update interval. So we're doing pretty good on time. At this point, I'm actually just in that folder. I'm in the AS3 folder, and if I run a Terraform plan, I'll see that it's actually going to try to push out this declaration. and then we can go ahead and run it. So we'll give this a second to run, and that's pretty quick. Looks like it completed in 4 seconds. So now we should start to see some different information. These are the LTM logs on that big IP instance. So you can see that some of our services became available here, and we should be able to validate in the console that our monitor is actually up. So we can go back into F5 now. We'll switch the partition, and then we'll check out the virtual server. We can see that service main is indeed running. If I drill into that, I can look at the resources for it and see that it's in the web pool. And this pool's got a couple members in it, or just one member in this case, which corresponds to our Nginx server. And then I can prove that this actually does work, which is awesome. But this is only half the story here. We want to talk about what if our Nginx servers are overwhelmed or pushing out a new application deployment. This used to be a ticketed process. Maybe it's 10 to 15 days to get these servers provisioned and add these IPs. Maybe you want to just have a more robust and resilient architecture. How do we actually do this in a way that we can sort of dynamically provision new nodes, get them registered in console, and get this information over to the big IP in this instance. So what I'm doing is this terminal window is this console server right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spin up some new instances, and then we're going to watch some of the output here and see this stuff happen in real time, and then get into the big IP. So I'm going to go back and just kind of look at the logs. Console monitor can be an easy way to do this, and we can actually look at it with a little bit more verbose output. So if I change the log level to debug, I can see that I'm actually getting queries for those requests. This is the big IP instance, and I can see it's asking me about Nginx at the interval that we requested. And then now let's go ahead and actually scale up this Nginx environment. So again, there's a lot of ways this can happen in an automated fashion, but we're just going to do it manually for the sake of the demo. So if I go ask for 2 more instances, I think maybe I got logged out of AWS. Let me see here what happens. And if this fails again, we're going to try to do it with Terraform. Okay, awesome. So desired capacity 3, 1 instance is running, and I'm getting this question mark box that should push some new instances up into the activity history here. And then we'll see them here. I'm going to turn on this feature called blocking queries to have the service update in real time. So we'll see these come into this view when they join. And then we can watch some of the catalog output here as these servers come up. So you'll see some registers and deregisters. This is from earlier when I was testing this before we ran the webinar. And then if I go back to AWS, I'll see that these new Nginx instances that are part of this auto-scaling group are not yet in service, but they should start coming up here in their provisioning. So I think the new ones that we got, we'll see them come up in this view as these, the provisioning for the Nginx is pretty simple. It installs Docker and runs Nginx in Docker and installs console. So there's just a short health check here on the console side that's going to do that for us. And essentially, once these checks are passing, we'll be able to see this come up in the big IP. So I'll load our network map. This is a nice view to check some of the stuff out. So I still just have that one healthy member in the pool. And this will get updated as these console nodes start to come online. So I see here that we had some new joiners. 071 just joined the nodes there, but Nginx is still not healthy on that node. Console's telling me that that health check is failing. These are now starting to come online. And now everything looks healthy. And if I go back into the big IP and refresh the screen, this was pretty cool. So what just happened here is that I got those new nodes. We didn't touch anything. We didn't touch anything with the big IP configuration. We got the service checks registered inside console. And these we were able to sort of update our big IP in near real time to get this into that virtual service. And again, we didn't actually lose any of those nodes, so there was no our service wasn't interrupted, but if our service was potentially getting overwhelmed, we just push some more load out there into the server group to spread out that capacity. And then you can, if you want, you can drill into any of those node pools and get some more detailed stats on these specific instances. Obviously, these ones don't have any traffic because we just spun that out. So yeah, that was a short demonstration of some of the power here. Again, things that we did. We were able to register nodes initially. Then we were able to scale out our architecture with more capacity. We were able to get that information registered in Consul in near real time. And if we go to any of these instances, you can see that we'll do 171 as an example. So we'll find that one, and we can connect to it really quick here and do just one final validation. I'm in my Terraform folder. This Terraform output will put a new key file in the directory for you, so you can just use it. And then if I look at that console output, you'll see that first it came up, it was still waiting for Nginx to start becoming available. And then once this check synced on the local agent on the Nginx box, that's ultimately what allowed us to get this information over. And you could see that we were actually getting queries at that AS3 interval for that service. So that wraps up the demo piece, Sanjay. I think we covered most of what we wanted to cover there, and that should leave us, Mani, about 15 to 20 minutes for questions.
Awesome.
Great. Hey guys, this is Chang from HashiCorp, working on product marketing for Consul. I'm helping with moderating the questions with Mani today. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop in the Q&A box, and we'll help to accommodate as much question as we can. So the first question is actually for Sanjay. What version of BigIP does this Terraform provider and also Consul that work with?
Yeah, so if you look at, we already released a new version of Terraform provider, BigIP Terraform provider, that is 12.4, and actually you can use for the RPM, AS3 RPM, you can use 3.7, onwards it is supported, and BigIP version you can use 14.1. Does it answer your question?
Thank you, Sanjay. I don't think the audience can say yes. Well, the second question is also for you, Sanjay. Is there a plan for bootstrap and onboard of F5 instances on Azure by using Terraform only and without using ARM templates, etc.?
So currently the support is not with Terraform provider. Eventually we will add that, but currently we are not supporting. So currently if you want to deploy, you have to use ARM template. And yeah, that is the status right now.
Awesome. So the next question is for Lance, as this is regarding the demo with Consul. So were the pool members added dynamically by querying the console, and who's made the change on the F5 devices?
Yeah, so I can answer at least from our side. So yeah, when we showed that, and I'll put it in the QA box as well. But so the actual, if you look at our catalog API, there's an API in there called list nodes for service. And if you look at our AS3 declaration, that was the actual URI that we used. So it was /service. And then the last part is the query parameter for Nginx, which allowed us to return those nodes in that RESTful payload back to F5. And then the BigIP can take that information from our API and essentially add or remove nodes from the pool. Sanjay, I don't know if you want to add any more to that. But from our side, that's sort of the catalog API that we exposed for AS3 in this demo.
Yeah, so AS3 has actually a worker node which polls the console, and that's how we get all the information from the console. So that in turn AS3 will basically update the pool information or the pool members.
So Sanjay, we have a follow-up question on the version here. Does this only work with 14.1 Big IP version? Isn't 12.1 supported in newer versions?
So if you look at AS3, so we follow what AS3 is supporting. So if you look at AS3 supported 13.1 onwards. So, and for this demo specifically, we have tested with 14.1. So ideally, it should work with 13.1 as well. So, and yeah, and the AS3 version, you need to test with 3.7 currently, 3.7 onwards.
The GitHub repo that Lance showed earlier, does it contain all the steps to build out the same demo?
Yes, so we have, so if you look at the GitHub repo, we have a README there, and the README gives all the steps, so which are required. So once you clone it, you can follow the steps. And one thing you have to do is you have to go to F5 Cloud Docs. The link is already there to download the RPM manually. But if you don't want to do that manually, you can also use basically shell script to do that. You can use null resource and call that shell script. All that information is there on the Cloud Docs.
Cool. So the next question is for Lance. Is Consul a highly available system? How does Consul support this?
Yeah, great question. So Consul is a highly available system. We use some gossip and consensus protocols under the hood, both to communicate with groups of large number of nodes. It's not uncommon to see Consul data centers powering application servers, in the thousands, 5,000 plus, in a sort of performant way. For the actual servers, the agents are mostly stateless and forward a lot of the requests for information to the servers, and provide information to the servers like their local, health check states. As far as the catalog goes and where a lot of that statefulness is and availability for the system, essentially we recommend it's an n-1/2 pattern where most people deploy typically 3 or 5 nodes, which is a good balance of availability and performance. And if you have very, very large clusters pushing a lot of volume, there's a way that you can add enterprise console non-voting members to actually sort of horizontally scale out that console cluster for better performance. So the answer is yes, and we can, if you want to follow up with us, we can point you in the right direction for the console docs that go into that architecture in more detail.
Okay, the next question is for Sanjay. Does this solution support other F5 modules like ASM and ASM besides LTM?
You can deploy, AS3 supports ASM, so you can deploy ASM through using Terraform. And you can use AS3 resource to deploy that JSON, declarative JSON. So traditionally, if you look at the Terraform provider doesn't support ASM profile, but you can use AS3 to deploy ASM, and in turn, you can do that using AS3 resource on Terraform provider.
Cool. The next question is for Lance. So you just demoed the Consul work on AWS. Does Consul work on other cloud providers?
Yeah, it does. Consul is just a single binary that's compiled in Go for multiple platforms. You can run in your own data centers. It can run on bare metal VMs. It can run in container schedulers such as Kubernetes with a Helm chart that'll help you actually deploy it into that environment. And it's cloud agnostic as well. And to that end, we do have that same service discovery configuration that I showed for auto joining nodes on AWS. There's support for that on other clouds as well, such as GCP and Azure.
Thank you, Lance. The next one's for Sanjay as well. Are we able to tear down the resources that are built using AS3?
So this version of AS3 resource, we are just dumping the JSON, declarative JSON, but we're gonna improve that and make it stateful. So you can definitely destroy the AS3 created application service. But if you want to do stateful, then we need to do some work actually on making it stateful. But to answer your question, if you just create and if you want to get rid of the configuration, you can definitely use Terraform destroy to destroy the AS3, which is configured on BigIP.
Awesome. So the next question is for Lance. So you mentioned about Consul health check, but can you provide more details about how Consul health check work and how fast the resource status gets updated if it's down or failed?
Sure. So and if you go to the Consul docs, there's an entire page there that talks about the different types of health checks that you can run, TCP, HTTP, like L7 health checks you can do, right, on like, health endpoint that an application might have. There's script checks, which you basically just have a lot of options. The one that I showed in there was a simple TCP check just for localhost 80 for Nginx with an interval of 10 seconds and a timeout of 1. So a lot of that at the actual agent level is configurable, and you can optimize it for your workloads. Consul is very good at converging in the way that all the nodes can sort of figure out that there's failures and communicate that as a whole. And generally, even in almost 10,000 node clusters, you're looking at convergence of under 2 seconds and generally much faster for nodes like, or for events like a node is completely down and all of its services are offline. To be distributed kind of to the whole cluster, and then the catalog to understand those events. So it's pretty quick. It's configurable, and in most cases, we showed some different places you could configure it. Right, you had different intervals that you could configure on the F5 side. We had a basic health monitor to complement Consul's checking. You could configure that. There's just a lot of different choices and flexibility, but it's designed to be very edge-based. And performant as well.
Awesome. So I think the next question is also related to the Consul dynamic update. So is the data synchronized automatically after pushing the script, or we have to manually do it at the device level? Is the question clear enough for you guys?
So is it for the console or it's for AS3? So if it is for if it is for AS3, yes, you can deploy AS3 RPM using null resource, Terraform null resource, and you can do that, and it should get synchronized. It's not a problem. You don't need to do manually. You can integrate that in the shell script as well, in the Terraform as well.
This one is for Lance. Lance, earlier you showed the demo. Are you able to show the monitor configuration? Are you able to show what the monitor configuration on the BigIP looks like?
Yeah, so let me go back to that. So the monitor that we had for the AS3 declaration was just a simple, the out-of-the-box HTTP monitor. And if I go back to the monitor for the web pool, it just has the HTTP monitor on it that's active. And then here are the members. Sanjay, is there something else that I should be showing for the monitor, or?
So, so if you go to the on the GUI, if you show that is there already, and also the nginx JSON will have the monitor configuration. Like in this case, it is HTTP. Yeah, I think pretty much that's what is required.
Sanjay, we have one more question for you. Will the same solution also scale down in F5? The audience is requiring for clarification around if they reduce the number of Nginx instances, will AS3 reduce the nodes back to the reduced number?
Exactly, yeah. That's what it will do, actually. Once, let's say, one of you, like couple of your servers are down, since we are polling, actually, Consul will send that information. And
I think we can do that real quick if we want. We can just bring it back down, and we should be able to get those updates. So if we go back to, it takes a little bit longer on Amazon to scale these back down. But if we wanted to reduce the capacity back to 1, and I could have made that change with Terraform. Once these termination signals, this takes about 30 seconds. And then we should start to see, we'll see in Consul, these go first. You'll see a couple of those deregistration events, which means the entire node is offline in here, and then we should see those changes. So let's see if we've got some scaling from, it's just a little bit hit or miss here on when exactly this happens in AWS. It usually takes anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. So now these are terminating. And I've got the, so these were the two, so two of these nodes just left, 174 and 186. And the Nginx checks on the Consul side are starting to scale down. And then if I go back to the web pool, they're starting to go offline, basically. And then once this is completely removed, we've got a healthy pool, Sanjay, and then we're back down to that single instance based on that request that we asked from Amazon, and the application itself is still available, basically. So yeah, I think we could pull the stats maybe from the node pool. Would be easier way to show that. But in any case, yeah, to answer your question, yeah. So we've got that one instance up there now, and it's still receiving traffic. So yeah, this is all cleaned up for you automatically, and you don't have to do any of this as the operator. You know, the big IP knows how to work with Consul and essentially reap these nodes and then get them out of the pool. Yeah, so that's how it works on for the workflow.
Yeah, and in the AS3 discovery JSON, you can always change the update interval. Currently, it is set for 5 seconds. So depending upon your requirement, you can change that configuration on the AS3 JSON side.
Just one quick clarification on the versioning here, folks. The AS3 works with BigIP version starting TMOS 12.1. And the Terraform provider itself has been tested from 13.1 onwards. Although the support for AS3 in Terraform provider has been added recently, it should work seamlessly. And that concludes today's webinar. A recording of this presentation will be emailed to you in the follow-up communication. So please be on the lookout for that. And thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.